thing. You're like, is this the rest of my life? Am I going to be waking up like this
Yeah.
every single day? You know?
So a question I really want to ask you is, what was life like before the Baclofen pump versus after the Baclofen pump? I've got a good idea, but I'd love you to tell it in your own words.
Yeah. So basically, before any bumpy surface that I'd roll over, it didn't matter if it was just really light gravel or I don't know if you see those like when you're on the street and you're going, up a curb and there's that little like plastic rumble strip. I don't know what to call it, but it's basically,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
people don't fall. I used to hate those things because anytime I'd roll over one, my body would just go crazy. And I always felt like I had like a vice around my core section. It was just extremely tight. I mean, it felt like I couldn't breathe very well. And then I went in for like the trial dose to see if I was a candidate for baclofen for the pump because it doesn't work for everybody. So they have to give you
Yeah.
like a bolus dose just to see how it works. And I remember rolling out of that doctor's office like, holy shit, this is how life used to be, like as far as,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in a wheelchair, but like I can control my body. It's not like I'm trying to, take care of a, 25-year-old baby, that's spazzing out. Like that's literally what it was. So,
Yeah.
and sleep got so much better.
Oh, I can imagine.
Transfers got so much better. I mean, it wasn't that,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a scary thing. Yeah, probably the first, the 6 months because I got the backflow pump within about 10 months of my injury.
That's
But
incredible. That's so good.
yeah,
A lot of
but within
people
that
suffer for
time,
so much longer.
yeah, but I was just at that point where, like, when I went to the doctor, he's like, "We got to get this for you quick," because he said yours are as pretty much as bad as I've seen. As far as your tone, and the tone I could kind of deal with. It was a pain in the ass, but it was the spasms, the really like hard kicking spasms, mainly my back kicking backward. That was the worst. So,
Yeah, I can
but
imagine. Like my spasms are similar. I can relate to what you're saying, but not on the same level. But they're
yeah,
obviously a lot lower down. I don't get the spasms in the core as much, but I do a little bit. Like it's really hard for me to, if I'm laying down to get up. It's for me. It's like you say. It's the tone. It's the rigidness more than the spasms.
yeah,
It's the constant muscle tightness. I love
hmm,
the analogy that you used of like wrestling with a 25-year-old baby. It does
yeah,
feel like that. Like it feels like I'm wrestling against my body. It's hard to explain to someone who doesn't know how you're wrestling against, like you have these violent outbursts from your own limbs, and you're
right,
wrestling with your limbs and they're so stubborn. You're like, I'm pulling them and I'm like, oh, my leg just won't bend. It's just rigid, so rigid,
yep,
stiff. It's annoying for transfers. But again, they're not that bad. Like obviously, when I look at myself in a vacuum, I think, oh, they're terrible. They're awful. I hate them. And I see other videos of people on YouTube and I'm like, whoa, they're not that bad. So
yeah,
all of a sudden it turns into like gratitude. I'm like, well, it could be worse. So yeah, they don't kick out as much, but I know a lot of people that do suffer from such horrible spasms. I know a girl who's had a hip replacement, and her spasms are sort of really, really, really damaging her quality of life, and she is fighting tooth and limb to get a baclofen pump, and like you to get one within 10 months. It's kind of obvious that she is a prime candidate for a baclofen
right.
pump, but they're dragging their heels, and I don't know when she's going to get one, but her quality of life is being dragged through the mud, and she's been injured for over 2 years now, and it's really savage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the downside of the backflow pump for me has just been financially. So, like, I have a friend that's in Canada. In Canada, they have like, government health care, but here we have, private health care. And so every time I go to get the pump refilled, it is, I'm trying to think, before I meet my deductible, it's $1,800 to get a refill. And then
Wow.
after my deductible, it's $500 every time I go get it filled. So if I'm
Oh,
getting
so
it, if I'm getting it filled every 3 months, I mean, it's expensive to maintain. And that it's only because I am on private insurance. I'm not on Medicare or anything like that. And they won't give me Medicare because they say that since I'm working, I'm technically not disabled. But I recently had the pump replaced because after about 6 years, they have to replace it because the battery will eventually go dead. So they try to get ahead of that. And I got the bill that was, they billed $65,000 to replace the pump. And that is just simply taking the pump out, making an incision, taking the pump out of your stomach, disconnecting it from the line, reconnecting it from the line, and then sewing you back up. Literally took 20 minutes. The doctor told me, it's like a 20-minute procedure. And I'm like, what the, you get this bill. And I'm like, holy shit. I mean, my part of that was $6,000. So this year has been very expensive just due to the Baclofen pump. But even that said, I don't know if I could live without it. It's like you pick your battles, Do I want to pay, all this money every single year for my medical bills, or do I want to be miserable,
Well, I think, to be honest, if you gave, so my friend is called Casey. I think I can say her name. She's interested in coming on the podcast as well. I think if you gave her the choice at the moment, she would be like, yeah, okay, I'll pay the money, just anything. But then I guess you're signing up. It's like a subscription, right? It's like, so if I get this right, you have to pay $500 every month, every 3 months.
Well, that's after I met the deductible for my insurance. So what I'm saying is it's at least 500 because 500 is my 20% copay. So they're billing they're billing about $5,000 every time they fill it, which if you're on Medicare or if you have other insurance, I mean, there's many, many Americans that don't pay a cent for it, because they have, they have coverage through Medicare or, maybe it's disability or what is it called? Workers' comp. If they were injured, from work, then that covers it. But in my situation, it's under my private insurance, which unfortunately is 80-20. So they pay 80% of anything and I pay 20%.
Interesting. Yeah. It's odd. I think, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the politics of American healthcare, but over here we get, I get all my healthcare for free. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful system, or it's at least heavily subsidized, and I have to pay very, very minimum stuff. But I have a disability card now, which entitles me to I take oral Baclofen, and I get that for free. I get all of my meds for free, and most of my medical procedures for free. I didn't have to pay anything for the surgery. I got rescued from the mountain. I got a ambulance to the hospital, which was like a 3-hour drive away. I got all the surgery. I woke up and there was no bill to pay, which was amazing. I love that. However, for example, if I want a Baclofen pump, I think I'd be a good candidate. Again, I'm on the fence. It's been 5 years. I can live with it. The benefits of the spasms is that I don't have much muscle wastage. My legs haven't atrophied that much. I can imagine the difference it would make in my life if I did have a Baclofen pump.
Yeah.
But I have to convince the doctor that it's bad enough for them to give me one. Whereas I think if in America, you could be like, hey, I've got the money, give me one. And they'd be like, hey, if you can afford it, we'll chuck it in you.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I have a friend that lives in Italy, and she said the same exact thing where, there is government healthcare, but you have so many more hoops that you have to jump through. And she was basically telling me that if there's a cheaper option for you, then they're always going to go with the cheaper option unless you get, a doctor or somebody to really be your advocate and, explain why it's so important for you. So, yeah, there are pros and cons. I don't think I would have gotten it within 10 months, had I not have private insurance. So that was good, but it's just the regular maintenance. Cause it's not something that's going away,
Yeah.
And I'm constantly paying on this bill that just never gets smaller. In fact, it just keeps getting bigger. So it's
I can imagine.
Since COVID, currently owe $12,000 that I just keep
Oh wow.
paying on monthly and monthly. So it's a pain in the ass financially, but it's worth it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, man. I mean, they really got you by the balls. I mean, like, they could be like, hey, Baclofen's just gone up in price, and you'd be like, well, I guess I'll pay it then.
Right. Yeah, you don't really have a choice. It's like, do I want to be miserable? And I've even tried to wean on, like, try to lower my dose just to see, because it's been in me for so long that I kind of forget how bad they were, and then I'll start waking up, just a little more uncomfortable and a little more tight, and I'm like, I finally got to a point where I'm like, screw it, just up it, up the dose back to what it was. Just wasn't. It's not worth dicking with, not because it does affect your quality of life, and I get it.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like I'm actually on more than the maximum dose of oral baclofen. You're only supposed to be taking 80 milligrams a day, but I take 120 milligrams a day, which is, I guess, is like a third over the top.
Yeah.
And when I go back to the doctors, they can't prescribe me more because the pharmacy aren't legally allowed to give me more. So I just go back to the doctor sooner. And she's like, well, I can do that, but you gotta get your blood checked. We gotta find a solution because we can't just keep giving you more and more baclofen. And I'm like, I get it, but like if I take less, my spasms are worse. And it's like, yeah. I mean, stretching helps, exercise helps, lots of things help. But like, I have an office job now, and when I'm sat here and my muscles are really tight and they're kicking out, like nothing really helps. Yeah, I don't know. Again, they're not as bad as I've seen online. Like, I try not to complain too much about them. And I guess as time goes on, the more you get used to them, it's like my new normal, which is not great. Like, it's not like it's not like I love it. It's interesting. Also, I've noticed that my girlfriend's really got used to it as well. Like I when other people see my spasms, I always get quite embarrassed because I think a lot of people just don't know. They just think, oh, a paralyzed man, his legs are flaccid, right?
Right.
And when you
exactly.
see the rigidness and the, it's embarrassing, and I don't like really people looking at me, and I guess I've never really been that embarrassed in front of my girlfriend. I can't remember, but like the fact that she's got so used to it, and like the fact when she sees my legs tighten up, she's like, oh, like, do you want me to straighten them out for you, or do you want a stretch? Or sometimes she gives me a little foot massage actually, and that helps quite a lot as well. So it's
cool.
really nice to have that sort of like understanding and not being embarrassed about it in front of her. But yeah, it's interesting how she's got so used to it as well,
Yeah. I had a question for you. So I was on 120 of Baclofen, and I think it was some other spasm medicine called tizanidine or something like that. But
I think tizanidine,
Yeah. What I was having issues with was falling asleep at the wheel. So I would be driving home from work, and it would make me so drowsy. Do you have that? Or do you feel like that's gone away?
I think I'm very, very lucky. Like, a lot of people get drowsy with oral baclofen, but I'm not one of them. I also take Valium or diazepam at night, or I used to. I mean, I've taken a lot less now. I certainly sleep better with it, but I kind of wake up a little bit groggy. That certainly makes me drowsy because it's Valium,
Yeah.
But yeah, luckily the baclofen doesn't make me drowsy at all. So I guess I'm just one of the. Yeah, if it did. Wow, I think, well, I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah. I mean, going like this and all of a sudden open your eyes and you're still driving. It's like, holy shit, that was not a good thing. And when I told my doctor about that, he's like, a lot of his patients didn't commute. They didn't drive. They had other people driving them. But he said, since you drive yourself, that's a really big hazard, obviously for you and other people is what he told me. So that kind of sped up getting the pump also. But yeah.
That's not good, is it? You can have some relief from your spasticity, but here's a side order of narcolepsy.
Right, exactly. So
I don't think that, yeah.
I was going to say, like, with the pump, like, I've also noticed that, I'm much more of a lightweight with alcohol because it seems,
really?
Yeah, it seems like it kind of plays, a little bit of a piece in, like, if I have a couple beers, like, I get really tired, which never used.
Really?
I mean, a lot of people have that issue, but for me, it just seems to, I think it just intermixes with, my baclofen dose, and it just makes me more drowsy. I mean, even if you read the label on yours, it probably says don't use with alcohol or something. I don't know if that's
Possibly,
true
yeah.
or
Well,
not.
I actually gave up drinking alcohol since my injury, so it's been 5 years sober now. So I don't have that. I haven't had that experience of drinking alcohol with baclofen, but I think that might have had something to do with it. In the early days, they were saying, "Oh, don't drink alcohol with the baclofen," and I don't know, whatever. I think the most contributing factor was when I had my first beer, I really wanted to smoke. And I was like, oh, well, I've kind of given up smoking, so I may as well just give up that because then I won't want this, So
Yeah.
that
No,
was,
I know
that was
what
the
you
big
mean.
one for me.
Yeah. Nicotine and alcohol are like, they're buddies, I
Yeah,
deal with,
they are.
I deal with the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.